Welcome to Zone Defense.
How's it going, everybody? We are Zone Defense. I'm joined, as always, by my co-hosts, Chris and Ryan. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Instagram at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast, and be sure to ring that bell to get posts, notifications. Ryan, what are we talking about today?
Today we're going to preview the NFC East. There's a lot of interesting teams, most notably America's team, Dallas Cowboys. Also got the Giants, Eagles, and the Redskins to cover today. So we're going to dive into their draft picks, their offseason additions, subtractions, and kind of predict what we see for this coming season for each team.
Yeah, let's dive right into it. So the NFC East, it's really kind of been a two-team race here the last few years. Of course, the Giants and Redskins kind of sneaked their divisional wins in there here and there, and Giants, of course, won a Super Bowl a while back. But it's mainly been the Cowboys and Eagles division to lose. And the first team we're going to talk about today is, like Ryan mentioned, America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. They were arguably the most disappointing team last year in the entire NFL. They went 8-8 and missed the playoffs. However, on paper, they had one of the most talented rosters in the league. That, of course, cost Jason Garrett his job, finally. They brought in Super Bowl winning coach Mike McCarthy, who formerly coached the Green Bay Packers. He says that he learned from the Masters and has greatly improved his coaching skills after being kind of unceremoniously let go by the Green Bay Packers. So the Cowboys believe he'll be the coach that leads them back to the promised land. In terms of player additions, they added defensive tackle Gerald McCoy, safety HaHa Clinton Dix, edge rusher Alden Smith, cornerback Anthony Brown, defensive tackle Datari Poe, kicker Greg Zuerlein, cornerback Maurice Kennedy, and of course, the greatest quarterback in the league, Andy Dalton. They also lost a lot of players too, especially on the defensive end, losing stud cornerback Byron Jones to the Miami Dolphins and edge rusher Robert Quinn to the Chicago Bears. Offensively, they lost Randall Cobb to the Texans, longtime center Travis Frederick, who retired, as well as longtime tight end Jason Witten, who decided to go to the Las Vegas Raiders. Other notable subtractions were Cam Fleming, Xavier Suafilo, Michael Bennett, Malik Collins, Jeff Heath, and Tavon Austin. In the draft, they had a very good draft. They got arguably the steal of the entire draft, selecting arguably the best receiver in CeeDee Lamb out of Oklahoma, baby, with the 17th pick of the draft. They also got a pretty decent steal in the second round with Trevon Diggs, cornerback out of Alabama. In the third round, they took Neville Gallimore, defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. And in round 4, they selected Reggie Robinson II, cornerback out of Tulsa. So, guys, do you think the Cowboys will finally be able to kind of get over the hump and finally live up to their potential, or do you think they might miss the playoffs again and lose to the rival Eagles?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start this off, Drew. I actually think the Cowboys are due for a bounce back year this season. You know, I know they lost a lot of pieces on the defensive side of the football, but adding Mike McCarthy to the offense should hum just like it did last season with Dak Prescott taking another step forward, in my opinion. And you can't really discredit the signings of Gerald McCoy, HaHa Clinton Dix, Alden Smith, which is a little controversial, but he's probably still got some talent left in him after not playing for a few seasons, with having some off the field issues with him. I think those three definitely improved it. They may not improve the defense, but kind of slide into the roles. Byron Jones is going to obviously leave a big hole, but I feel like these guys can kind of make up for that. And Travis Frederick's another issue that they're going to have. One of the best centers in the NFL, great run blocker, great pass blocker. That's going to be tough on their running unit for at least the start of the season to just figure out how Zeke's going to find holes.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of concerned about the defense, honestly. I mean, looking at last year, we know the offense is ranked number 1 in the NFL, both in scoring and points per game and total offense. But like Chris said, Alden Smith's kind of dated. I also think Gerald McCoy's kind of towards the end of his career. Clinton Dix is a serviceable pickup to the secondary, but losing Byron Jones is huge. I don't think they can afford to lose someone like that, especially when they were struggling on the defensive side of the ball. They really didn't address that in the draft. I mean, they got Diggs, but that was about it for someone who can make an instant impact. I do like the CeeDee Lamb pickup, but someone I want to focus on is Tyler Biadasz from Wisconsin. If you don't know about Wisconsin, they're like an assembly line for offensive linemen out there. And I think not right away, but I think eventually he could start to fill the role of that Frederick left. So I don't know. I think they're due for a bounce back year, but I don't think they have what it takes to break through and make it deep.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there, Ryan. I think that they have enough to win this division. We'll talk about the Eagles a little bit later here, but I think they did enough to. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, they were better than the Eagles last year, and they just didn't live up to the potential. But I think they did enough to kind of fill the holes that they lost to at least make the playoffs this year. But when you look at the other teams that are probably going to come out of some of the other divisions here in the NFC, I don't really think they can compete with them. Offensively, I think they can compete with anybody. I'm sure we'll talk about Dak Prescott here in a second, but I think he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league. He gets a lot of hate, and I don't really think it should be that it's really
Agreed.
warranted. As well as Ezekiel Elliott, one of the best running backs in the game, and look at that wide receiving core with adding Lamb to what was already there with Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. Their defense, I think that's the thing that kind of holds them back. I mean, some of these guys kind of pop. If Gerald McCoy, Alden Smith, they play well. Ha Clinton Dix proves to be a good pickup, and they can somehow kind of overcome the loss of Jones and Quinn. I think they could be make a deep postseason run. But kind of like you said, Ryan, I think the defense is going to hold them back from reaching their ultimate true potential. And I think that they're probably going to end up losing in the wild card round eventually. Maybe kind of sneak out because I know the playoff field is expanded this year, but yeah, I don't envision them making a deep playoff run just because of that defense.
Yeah, I think this team has a ceiling of about the divisional round. Maybe sneak into an NFC championship. If the cards fall right, I guess. But yeah, I kind of agree with you guys. The defense definitely lost a lot of pieces. I think they're really going to struggle in the secondary because their front seven, not terrible. It's at least it's decent. It's serviceable. But after that, the back end of the defense is probably going to get torched. Not playing in the strongest division is going to help them there. They're going to pick up some more wins in that regard. But when they have to play some of these higher powered offenses in other divisions and the Philadelphia Eagles, I think it's going to be rough for that defense.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, I mean, you could have if Diggs like pops off and he can fill in for Jones, and then you got Allen Smith can somehow kind of like you said, Chris, overcome some of the off the field issues he's had and kind of replace what the hole that Robert Quinn left. Um, they could, I mean, potentially make a deep postseason run, but a lot of things really got to fall their way. And even Dak Prescott, I know I kind of talked about him earlier, how I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, not one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but definitely a top 10, top 15 level guy. Um, he even could kind of fall off here, and maybe you have to throw Andy Dalton in a starter role. Who knows? Um, but I don't know. Offensively, I think this offense just powers them to at least, like you said, Chris, the divisional round.
Yeah, I think the addition of CD Lamb can only help. Obviously, only help Dak Prescott. If he can't succeed with these weapons, they definitely shouldn't pay him the big bucks. And I agree with Drew that I think he's uh, like a top 10 quarterback around there. But he definitely has to take a step forward. He had a rough second half last year. His stats are very inflated by his first 8 or 9 games of the season where he was very good. And he kind of fell off after that. But that kind of has to do with Amari Cooper having a lot of injury issues. His number one receiver going down, and he loves to target Cooper. Down the field. He's a safety valve for him. So with Cooper being healthy again, I think that's really gonna contribute to some positive regression back to how he was playing in the beginning of the season.
Do you think there's any? Are you guys concerned about what happened with McCarthy and Rodgers carrying over with Prescott and McCarthy? Do you think that's something that we should watch out for? Or?
No, I think, at least in my opinion, I think Dak is a more, how do I put this? More humble
Emotionally
than
mature.
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, maybe more emotionally mature than Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers has a really big ego, partially for good reason. I mean, he's one of the top quarterbacks ever in NFL history. But I think Prescott, he's a little more down to earth, and I also think McCarthy learned a lot from that experience. And I think, like I kind of mentioned at the top, he says that he learned at the feet of the masters, and he's going to bring this new age offense to his team. He's not the same guy he was in Green Bay, so I believe that. And by all accounts, the guys are pretty happy with him. I think for the most part so far. So I'm not too worried. I think Aaron Rodgers is more the problem than Mike McCarthy was in Green Bay, if I'm being honest. But we'll probably get into that more in the NFC North preview. But I don't know how you feel, Chris, but I'm not too concerned about it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying there. I think a majority of the problem was Rodgers. I think McCarthy is kind of stuck up in his own way. So, there's that to kind of look at as well. I think he's kind of one of those coaches that like really wants to iron home that he's the coach. Yeah, he's the guy that leads his team or whatever. And I think him and Rodgers just really clash. Kind of a more of a quiet leader or whatever. He definitely is. I think he is a very good leader of this offense. I think he's a very good face of the franchise as long as he plays like he did in the beginning of the first half last season. But I think they're gonna have a very good relationship, and now with Kellen Moore leading that offense, I think McCarthy's going to be asked to do a lot less on the offense side of the football and more just kind of balancing personalities on this team because there is a lot of big personalities on the team.
Yeah. Their offensive line is not as good as it used to be, as we're kind of accustomed to the Dallas Cowboys having, at least in recent years. So I'm kind of wondering, do you guys think that Zeke will still be like an elite level running back, or do you think he might even take a step back this year just because that offensive line is a little bit depleted?
I think he has the talent to do it. I like Zeke as a running back. I think he's a top 5 one at the position. He got a lot of talent, very well balanced, well rounded. I think the fact that he's always on the field, he's very durable, is probably his best attribute. I don't think he's elite at any one skill. I think he just kind of does everything well rounded. Maybe between the tackles going to be a little tougher without Frederick being there and like kind of pushing the line. But I think maybe they'll address some more outside runs because they still have very good, tackles, and he's a very good pass catcher as well. So I think he's still going to have a very good season and a very good rest of his career.
Yeah, I agree because we saw last year Lyle Collins and Tyron Smith both. There were times where they were
Right.
off the field with injuries, and he was still pretty productive. I think even if he's not, I mean, the weapons that they have on the outside with Amari Cooper and CD Lamb, I mean, or just having him come out of the backfield, I think you can put him anywhere and he'll be successful. So I'm not too worried.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, Ryan. Kind of addressing what you were just saying about the weapons as well. I feel like the defenses are not going to be able to stack the box as much as they were. When with Cooper being kind of injured last year, you didn't really have to you didn't have to double him as much. But when he's healthy, you need to double team him down the field because he's a very good receiver. And, Gallup and CeeDee Lamb are also extremely good weapons. So this team's going to be really spread out, and I feel like their teams are really going to have a hard time, stacking the box against Zeke. And I think he's going to have a lot of success, and that'll make up for Frederick being gone.
Before we kind of close out the Cowboys talk, I wanted to ask you, Ryan, because Chris and I kind of gave our opinions on Dak Prescott, saying how we kind of believe in him, that he's gonna rebound this year. What do you think about him?
I'm with you guys. I don't know where all the hate is coming from. I think it's because a lot of people don't like the Cowboys, but what he's done, I mean, in his time so far, both as a runner and as a thrower, I mean, he's really impressed me. I think he's going to have a bounce back year. I think he's going to be running around a little bit more since Frederick left, but I'm confident in his abilities. I think he'll take a step forward this year, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's kind of boom or bust. Kind of close the Dak Prescott talk here is that if he has a real, I mean, I think with the weapons he has this year, he could have the potential to have I don't want to say MVP level year, but like
Borderline.
close to that. Yeah, borderline. But I mean, if he can't do it with this offense, I think he might be quickly kind of out of a job here because if you can't do it with this offense, then I'm not sure if you can do it with any offense. But I believe in him, like you guys. I think he can do it. But before we kind of close out Dallas talk here, what's like one fantasy stud that you guys are each looking forward to headed into this year's fantasy season?
I'll start it off with one I want to talk about a little bit more. Maybe not the most flashy player on this list, but I'd like to talk about Michael Gallup for a second here. I feel like people are kind of forgetting about him in a couple drafts I've done. They're more startup dynasty drafts. You kind of have to factor in Lamb is obviously going to be the more futuristic player on that team, but yeah, I feel like Gallup's still got a lot of value here. I think he's going to approach the 1,000 yard mark. You can't forget about how good he was last year. He had over 12,000 yards in only I think it was 14 games, paces out to around 1,300, 1,400 yards for a full season, and he was excellent inside the red zone too. He had a lot of nice touchdowns down there, and he was a big piece of why this offense was so successful. I think he's more of the guy you draft as your wide receiver 3, and you hope for more. I think he can still be a very good weapon, and he's kind of been just forgotten about now that they drafted Lamb.
Yeah, Gallup's an interesting player. I had him last year. There was some frustration. He did have some time off because of injuries, but I mean, there are
Right,
games where he goes off and he's kind of boom or bust. He's 20 yards
definitely.
per target kind of guy. But yeah, that's a solid pick for wide receiver 3. I mean, obviously you got Cooper and you got Prescott, but I'm gonna go tight end here. I'm gonna target Blake Jarwin. I think Prescott really likes to target his tight ends down in the red zone, and now that Witten's gone, it should open up some targets for Jarwin. It's definitely not a first option, but maybe like a backup to keep an eye out for. I would definitely watch out for Blake Jarwin this year.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite sleeper picks for the tight end position this year. I'm also a big fan of the Jarwin pick. I thought about addressing him here as well, but I figured someone else would talk about him. He's probably in the top 10 for tight ends for me, and I would definitely be willing to take a shot on him and maybe draft him and a guy like Noah Fant in the last rounds, and hope one of them booms.
Yeah, I agree with both your picks, especially you, Ryan. I mean, especially the tight end pool, like how thin it is. Once you miss out on kind of those two guys, it kind of drops off. So if you miss out,
Right.
I think that could be a really good draft pick. I was actually going to go with Ezekiel Elliott for all the reasons that we kind of talked about earlier with Zeke, but I'm going to kind of go off the board here. I'm going to say Greg Zuerlein, the kicker. I mean, we saw uh,
Wow.
we talked about how good this offense has potential to be, and we saw when Zuerlein was the kicker for the Rams when they had their like historic level offense a few years ago. I mean, he was by far the best kicker in the league. So
That's
their
fair.
defense lost some pieces. So the Cowboys are going to score a lot of points, a lot of extra point opportunities, a lot of field goals. So I think Zerline could be a decent kicking pickup. I think has the potential to be one of the best kickers in the league. So yeah,
Yeah, I would agree with
well,
that.
a little off the board, but I don't know. I kind of wanted to kind of shock you
For
guys a little.
sure.
So last thing, what is your overall grade for the Cowboys offseason? We'll start with you, Ryan.
Ooh, I'm gonna go with a B. I would have liked to see him address the defense a little more. I was a little surprised that they took CeeDee Lamb. I'm not saying that was a bad pick; it was a great pick, but picking 17th, you could have gone defense there. You lost obviously Byron Jones, your best defensive player, but I still think it was a solid offseason. I'll go B.
Yeah, I'm at about a B minus for them. Just above average for their offseason. Picking up CD Lamb, I agree with Ryan. They definitely could have gone defense, but I feel like they're kind of just trying to screw the Eagles here because obviously the Eagles were picking. We're gonna get into it in a little bit, but they were picking just a few spots behind them, and obviously they were looking for a receiver, and Lamb just kept falling. And I think I could have seen him falling all the way to 21 had they not taken him here, but they did it. And Diggs is like a low key pickup as well. I feel like he could kind of slot into the Byron Jones role in a couple of seasons. I think he's more of a developmental guy at the cornerback position versus a guy like Okuda or C.J. Henderson at the top of this class. I think it's going to take him a couple of years to do it, but I think he could be very good. So I'll give him a B minus.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I'm going to say B minus too. They added some interesting pieces with Lamb and even Trevon Diggs. I mean, I saw some mocks that had him as a potential first round pick, and getting
Yeah,
him in the second round, that's impressive and kind of addresses that hole that Byron Jones left. But at the same time, they lost a ton of guys. Um, but I think, yeah, above average still. Not a bad offseason, but not like a super spectacular offseason either. Um, yeah, so we'll kind of get into our predictions for the overall like record and positions there at the end once we go over each team. But I believe that's it for the Cowboys. So we're gonna hop into the next team that Chris kind of teased there, the Philadelphia Eagles, the defending NFC East champs, who went 9-7 last year, lost to the Seattle Seahawks in the wild card round of the playoffs, and it's really surprising that they were even able to win 9 games and make it to the playoffs because you look at how many injuries that this team had throughout the year. Even in that playoff game, they lost Carson Wentz down. And even if Wentz stayed healthy, I mean, you could make an argument that they might even win that
right.
game against the Seahawks and move on to the next round. I think they would have played the Packers. Um, but it's surprising, especially that wide receiving core that was depleted the entire year. And they really tried to kind of address some of those concerns this year, most notably in the draft. But in terms of free agency additions and trade additions, most notably, they got one of the best cornerbacks in the league, Darius Slay, through a trade with the Lions. They also added a defensive tackle, Javon Hargrave, cornerback, Nicole Roby Coleman, linebacker, Jatavis Brown, and then a wide receiver, Marquise Goodwin. One of the most underrated wide receivers in the game, in my opinion at least, through a trade with the San Francisco 49ers. However, they did lose a ton of people this year, most notably Malcolm Jenkins to the Saints, Nelson Aguilar to the Raiders, Ronald Darby to the Redskins, Jordan Howard to the Dolphins, and Halapulavati Vaitai to the Lions. I think I said that right. I'm kind of impressed by myself. They also lost Camus Crugier Hill, Timmy Jerrigan, Vinny Curry, Nigel Bradham, and Darren Sproles. And at the moment, they have not re signed Jason Peters as well. In the draft, they shocked some people by selecting Jalen Rager with their pick, the wide receiver at TCU with their first round pick. There were some other wide receivers on the board that people were kind of surprised that they didn't take, but I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later. But they surprised even more people with their second round pick by selecting Jalen Hurts, quarterback out of Oklahoma, considering the fact that they already have a quote unquote franchise guy in Carson Wentz at the quarterback position. Then in the third round, they took Davion Taylor, the outside linebacker out of Colorado. And then in the fourth round, they spent their 2 fourth round picks on Kevon Wallace, safety out of Clemson, and Jack Driscoll, the offensive tackle out of Auburn. So as I mentioned, they lost a ton of pieces, but they did add a lot of pieces as well, especially at that wide receiver position that was so uh, crucial to them not really living up to their full potential last season. So, guys, do you think they have enough to kind of again defeat the Cowboys and win the division and make the playoffs, or do you think that they're going to might take a little bit of a step back this year?
Yeah, I definitely think they have what it takes to at least compete for this division. But this is a team that's coming off a ton of pieces. They're just losing so many guys this year. You know, Jason Peters, if they can't re-sign him, that's a big piece. You know, Peters is a very old player, but he gives you that veteran presence at the tackle position on the offensive line. He's a very good run blocker as well. So that's going to be a tough loss if they can't re-sign him. Malcolm Jenkins also a tough loss. You know, another aging player, so you can't really blame him for not re-signing him. But you know, he's another player that offers that the intangibles that go along with his very high level of play. But on the Jalen Rager pick, I'd like to address that first. I actually really like the pick. You know, I think Rager was kind of up and down draft boards all season. You know, I've seen him up as high as like the number 2, number 3 receiver, but I've also seen him get taken in the second round in a couple different mock drafts. But I think Rager offers that big playability that they were kind of missing last season with all the injuries. You know, obviously Deshaun Jackson, Marquise Goodwin are very down the field threats, but these are guys that get hurt every single year. And Rager's had a pretty clean bill of health so far in his college career for the most part. And he offers kind of that down the field threat, a guy that can go up and get the ball. You know, he's a little shorter for a receiver, but I think he kind of makes up for that with his surprising athleticism. Not even surprising, just really good athleticism.
Yeah, to your point, Chris, though, isn't he coming off torn ACL, right, this past season? I think he tore his
Rager,
ACL. Yeah.
he might. I think he did actually. I think you're right. For the most
Okay.
part, he was
So
pretty.
that's
I'm
something
not
to
really
watch.
concerned about ACL injuries personally.
Yeah, but that he might take a while to rehab, but I'm pretty excited about him. He kind of reminds me of DJ Moore on the Panthers. Honestly, same slender build, not a big receiver, but like Chris said, surprising athleticism, and he's kind of a burner downfield. So yeah, he'll definitely give him a big play threat. I think adding Darius Slay is kind of a mixed bag. You really don't know what you're going to get out of. I'm not as high on him as Drew is. I don't think he's one of the best in the league, honestly. I think he's a little overhyped, but they do need some desperate help in the secondary. They were one of the worst secondaries in the league last year. So I'm still concerned about that, even with the addition of Slay. But yeah, those wide receivers could not catch a cold last year. So that was not much help for Wentz. And I'm also concerned about Wentz. Is he going to stay healthy this year? I mean, because I'm not confident Jalen Hurts to come in there and start winning them games in his rookie year. So that's definitely something to watch. I don't think this team has what it takes, especially with the Cowboys getting McCarthy this year, to compete with them. So I think they're going to take a step back.
That's very interesting, Ryan. That's definitely very possible with all the pieces they've lost. I think Slay was definitely an addition that needed to be made here. You know, when you're trying to compete with the Cowboys' high flying offense, you need corners, and this is a team that was absolutely horrendous in the secondary last year. Maybe the worst secondary in the NFL. They were just getting absolutely shredded last year, and the only reason they were able to get stops because their front seven are so good. And, they lost some pieces on the front seven, so you have to worry about that as well. Adding Javon Hargrave is a big deal because he's a very underrated tackle down there. You know, he can kind of do everything, but they still lost a lot of pieces. You know, Vinny Curry, Nigel Bradham, Timmy Jernigan, and Gruger Hill. Those are all pieces that were plus guys in their front seven, and that's going to be a problem to try to address that.
Yeah, I wanted to start off real quick. What you said, Ryan, about Slay is I do think he was a little bit overrated last year, especially with all his whining in the media about his contract situation. But I think that because that's kind of settled now, and I think he just seems to be a lot happier with Philadelphia now. And obviously the Eagles have at least a recent history of success. I think he could maybe kind of rebound and kind of return to that form he was at least a couple seasons ago. So, and kind of like what you said, Chris, they really needed to add some stuff on the secondary because
Right.
they really had nothing last year. But to the Jalen Rager pick, I was very surprised they took him. I thought Justin Jefferson, who the Vikings took with the very next pick, I kind of liked him a little bit more. I even actually like Denzel Mims. He was kind of a sleeper pick, and he didn't go till the second round to the Jets,
Right.
a little bit more than Rager. But honestly, like I'm not as too upset about it as like most Eagles fans are that they didn't get Jefferson. I thought kind of Rager, Jefferson, Mims, even T Higgins were kind of all like kind of in like the same kind of tier, and they got one of their really good guys in Jalen Rager. So um, I think I think he could potentially be a really good option there for Wentz. But again, to your point, Ryan, Wentz has to stay healthy. I mean, uh, I know Chris and I think we talked about this before, but Wentz, he's a really good quarterback when he's on the field. I think you're a little bit more positive on him staying healthy this year because he's had some fluky injuries. But he's hurt all the time, and even last year he was healthy for most of the season, but even then he really wasn't that great, and you could tell that he was noticeably banged up at least a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair. I kind of want to address you saying that he didn't play that good last year. I actually think he played really well last year. He just didn't have anybody to throw the ball to. You know, when you're throwing the ball to Greg Ward Jr. at the end of the season, who's a as a quarterback converted wide receiver that they took in the 6th or 7th round a couple of years ago. You know, you're going to struggle to pass the football, and he had Alshon Jeffrey just couldn't stay healthy all season. He was on and off the field, and he's really not that good anymore. Personally, he only catches about 50% of the balls thrown to him. He drops a lot. You know, Nelson Aguilar can't catch a cold. Uh, Deshaun Jackson played one game and he was awesome, but then he couldn't play the rest of his season. And even JJ Arcega-Whiteside was an absolute he was just an absolute in his first year. I thought he was going to be a lot better than he was. He didn't do anything. He didn't step up when everybody else was injured. And even Zach Ertz was out for a couple weeks. You know, that's really tough to deal with. It was basically just Miles Sanders and Greg Ward Jr. and Boston Scott was like his number 2 receiver, I guess you could say, which is just a running back that isn't even really that great of a pass catcher. So that's what he was working with at the end of the year.
Yeah, and if you watch the Lions game last year, oh my God, they had a couple of chances to win the games and win the game, and a couple of passes just went right through the hands. I don't know how that happens for an NFL wide receiver. So I agree with Chris. He was working with nothing last year. So for what he had, he had a pretty decent year, honestly.
Right. Was nowhere near a lead or anything last year. I thought he was very decent last year. You know, kind of carried this team to the playoffs. You know, the defense really wasn't even that great with their back four being so bad, and their receiving core, like I said, was just horrendously bad last year. Probably, I would say the worst in football all of last season. How they played in terms of injuries as well. When they're healthy, they're probably like an average unit, in my opinion. With Jeffrey's all right, Jackson's pretty good still, and you got to factor in Ertz and Rager now.
Yeah, and Dallas Goedert, he kind of emerged last year.
Goddard
Sorry.
as well.
Chris, are you worried though about the injury concerns that Ryan and I kind of seem to be kind of worried about, at least with Wentz? Are you kind of
With
a little more
Wentz, no,
optimistic?
I'm really not super worried with that. You know, last year he had actually had a pretty clean bill of health. You know, he played in all 16 games, but then went down with a concussion in the playoffs. That's concerning a little bit. But this is his first one of his career. You can't really that's not something you can predict. So if it's not his back injury, which was kind of held him out of the previous season, if that's not the concern right now, then I'm not really concerned about his injuries.
Was it last year the rumor was going around that he's not a good leader in the locker room and he's cocky? I think it was last year, right? That
Yeah.
was circulating. Are you
I've
concerned
seen
about
that a
that,
little
Chris?
bit. No, I'm really not. You know, I haven't really seen anything or heard anything from his actual teammates in terms of anything coming out publicly that he's like some bad teammate or anything. And he seems like a good dude. I know like outside looks, social media doesn't show everything, but he seems like a good dude. You know, he seems like he's always kind of helping out in the community. I've seen him even like addressing other teammates, on his Twitter. So you can't obviously again you can't see everything just by what he posts on Twitter. That's just an outward appearance, but he seems like a good dude to me.
Yeah, I completely forgot. I'm glad you mentioned that, Ryan. The leadership concerns too, with Wentz that kind of surfaced there. I think it was the last year that Foles was there, because Foles again led them to the playoffs 2 years ago, and then last year too they kind of resurfaced. So that is definitely a concern. But kind of like to your point, Chris, too. I think I follow him on Instagram, and he seems like a pretty nice guy. So I don't really know who was saying that stuff. But the last thing here, real quick, that I want to mention with the Eagles is we kind of mentioned it there. I think, Ryan, you said about Dallas Goedert, or however you say his last name. I always mispronounce it.
Got it. Yeah.
Um, there's some question about maybe he'll kind of overtake Zach Ertz at that tight end one role. Do you guys think that'll happen, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think Ertz is quickly becoming a washed up tight end in my opinion. I don't think he's as good as he used to be. You can see his kind of some of his uh, some of his analytics keep going down every season. Like his average depth of target. He's not stretching the field as much as he did early in his career. He's basically just a possession tight end now that catches 7-yard curls or like in routes and then just falls down. Goddard's that guy and kind of get over the top of the defense. He can make that jump ball catch, but he's not quite as good of a route runner, or he doesn't have as great of hands. I could definitely see him overtaking him in 2 years, not next year, or not this upcoming year, but the year after, I could definitely see him becoming the tight end one because I think Ertz is on his way out the door in a couple of years as well.
Yeah, I agree. Having Ertz last year in fantasy was very frustrating to have Goddard kind of emerge there. Like
Right.
Chris said, Ertz is Ertz is guy who's going to run like a 5 yard slant or a 7 yard curl, and that's it. That's what you're going to get out of him. It's disappointing, but I mean he's what 30, 31, getting up there in age, and
Yeah.
so it was for how many targets he was getting last year. I mean he was only getting like 50 yards a game and no touchdowns. It was very frustrating. So I think you'll definitely see maybe even close to like a 50-50 split for snaps this year. So that'll be something to watch, and that's why I would not draft Zach Ertz as my tight end one or anything like that. I would avoid him at all costs.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. Yeah, I'm looking to avoid him as well this year, fantasy, and he's a player that I could see with his injury history and his age just kind of falling off very quickly in the league, and Goddard just overtaking that role because Ertz is like we said, he's really getting up there in age, and it feels like he's even played longer than he's been in the league for 50 years at this point. He's just one of those aging tight ends. Travis Kelsey, another guy that is getting up there in age, but you don't see the same signs of you know age as you do in Ertz with Kelsey.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I was just curious as to how you guys kind of stood on it, but I think it's probably going to be much more of a 50-50 snaps between those two
Right.
guys. But unless you have any other Eagles talk, Ryan, you kind of mentioned from a fantasy perspective, like how you think maybe Ertz would perform this year. But from a positive standpoint, what is like the fantasy stud on the Eagles that you guys are looking forward to headed into this year's fantasy season?
I'm going to go with Miles Sanders. Kind of broke out last year. He can catch a ball out of the backfield. Can run between the tackles. Got great speed. I think, especially with the unknowns at wide receivers, I think he's going to be getting a lot of balls out of the backfield, used towards the goal line. So I'm going to go Miles Sanders. I think he's going to have another solid year here.
Yeah, I could see Miles Sanders being like that back end running back one, front end running back two. He's a guy I would like to draft in the second round of a lot of drafts and take the shot on him being really good. I don't really want him as my running back one, but if I take a guy like Zeke or Dalvin Cook or even Christian McCaffrey to some extent, if I can get Miles Sanders my RB2, I'm going to be absolutely ecstatic because that's another guy that has an extremely high ceiling, especially with the fact that he's really the only one back there right now besides Boston Scott. So I really like that pick there. I'll give you mine. I guess it's Deshaun Jackson's mine. If he can stay on the field, I could see him even being a wide receiver too. Obviously the question marks with his health are insanely high, but this is a guy you could probably in the last couple rounds of your draft, and he's a home run threat every time he steps on the field. So if he can stay healthy for even some games this year, you got a guy that is at least a flex play, but I could see him even being a wide receiver too in some weeks with clean health.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of take what you just said, Chris, and apply to a different wide receiver. I'm gonna go with Marquise Goodwin. I really liked him when he was with San Francisco, when he was like the clear cut like first option there. I think it was like the first year that Jimmy G was there when he played like 5 games. But then he kind of just got shuffled down the depth chart when they added new receivers like Emmanuel Sanders and Debo Samuel. But I really like Goodwin, and as we kind of mentioned, we were talking about Wentz. He is a good quarterback, and he just had nobody to throw to last year. And I think Goodwin, even though he's not like obviously he's not a top tier wide receiver in the league, but I think compared to what Wentz had last year, and if you kind of believe in if Wentz can stay healthy and the talent that Wentz has, I think he could kind of catapult Goodwin to a possibly borderline fringe wide receiver one in fantasy leagues and wide receiver two.
Wow.
So
Jeez.
I really like Goodwin. I mean, he was really good there in my opinion from a fantasy perspective. Kind of a sleeper there with when he had Garoppolo before he kind of dropped down. And I think Wentz is a way better quarterback than Garoppolo. So as long as Wentz can stay healthy, I think Goodwin could have a sneaky sleeper uh, fantasy season this year. He's more realistically going to be like a wide receiver two guy, but yeah, I was probably a little bit outlandish there when I said wide receiver one, but I don't know. I
I think
just
you're
like him.
outlandish by saying he's a wide receiver too. I like the lotto ticket you could get with Marquise Goodwin. I'm not disagreeing with you on that. He's a guy that you're not even going to have to draft. He's going to be on the waiver wire for you, and then if he blows up, you can go grab him. He could be that boomer bust, flex guy for me. But I really don't see him getting a lot of targets in this offense. This is one I'm going to actually disagree with you on. If Jeffrey, unless everybody just goes down again this year, which I can't project all the receivers in front of him go down. I don't see Goodwood getting a lot of snaps share on the field. With Jeffrey, Deshaun, and Jalen Rager all being ahead of him on the depth chart, in my opinion, going into his first year. But we'll see, I guess.
I'm banking on Jeffrey and actually Deshaun Jackson, your pick, Chris. either being old and not being as reliable and probably getting injured. That's kind of what I'm banking on for Goodwin to have a solid fantasy year from a fan. As I think Rager's going to stay on the field, but even Rager, I mean, he's a rookie. I mean, we really don't know, and there's definitely
Right.
some concerns, at least especially among Philadelphia people, over kind of how good he can be, especially right away. I don't know. I just believe in Goodwin. I liked him when he was in San Francisco, and I think there's definitely has to be a lot right. That's why I think
Right.
that he's definitely a sleeper pick. But I believe that he'll have a decent year as long as a few things kind of fall his way. But
Yeah, that's definitely a fair sleeper pick there for sure on Goodwin. You know, if those guys do go down with injury, I could definitely see him being that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 territory. But that's definitely a guy I'd be interested in. And if Jeffrey and Deshaun both go down, he's definitely the guy that steps in at least as the wide receiver 2 on the offense, maybe even the one if Rager, can't hit right away.
before we kind of give our overall grades on the Eagles offseason, I just realized I forgot to ask you both a question that I want to hear your thoughts on. Jalen Hurts, what are your opinions on him, real quick? Do you think he can maybe fill in that Nick Foles like role right away, or are you not as high as him on him as some people are?
I really don't know how they're going to use him, man. Hurts is a guy that I actually I do like his talent. I don't know if he can ever be a starting quarterback in the NFL, but this is a guy I feel like that can come in and be like he's going to play some snaps every game, even with Wentz being on the field. I feel like he's going to kind of just do a little bit of everything. Maybe like that Taysom Hill role. I know he's not as big of a body as Taysom Hill. He probably can't play the tight end position. This is a guy I could see making handoffs, running the read option, throwing a ball deep, with a fleet or something crazy like that, or like a pitch pass or any of those like plays that you can treat, like even a reverse pass or anything like that. I could see this is a guy you can kind of move all over the field. I can even see him playing a little bit of receiver for this team. And we were just talking about fantasy. This is a guy you definitely don't want to draft on your fantasy team or anything like that. But it's definitely someone to look out for in terms of the actual, Philly offense because he's make it better in my opinion. But I don't see him as a true backup.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. I just don't think he's that good of a drop back passer where he can play
No,
quarterback. Like Chris said, he's going to be using a lot of tricky packages. I think he's going to be used a lot towards the goal line. I think he's tough to bring down, especially when he's running. I would look to
absolutely.
see him towards the goal line, especially if Wentz is struggling or if they're struggling to get in the red zone. So
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. Doug Peterson's a really good coach, and I think it'll be interesting to see how he kind of utilizes him. And I was thinking the same thing, kind of in that Taysom Hill like role that Sean Payton does with Hill in New Orleans. But it'll be interesting to see how it works. It'll be especially interesting to see if Wentz goes down with an injury, and Hurts is kind of flung into that starting role to see if he either succeeds or he kind of falls down on his face. But a little more optimistic. I think he could kind of potentially maybe kind of fill in adequately if Wentz goes down. But overall, yeah, I think it'll probably end badly more often than it works out for the Eagles.
Right.
If Hurts is their clear cut number one starter. But last thing with the Eagles, though, what are your overall grades on their offseason?
I would say C plus for them. Lost a lot of pieces. Are able to get Slay, able to get Rager, which is a kind of debatable pick. Hurts is very questionable. It was definitely a reach. There's no arguing with that. I don't think they
Yeah,
needed it in the second round. So I'm gonna go ahead and give what did I say C plus C somewhere
C
around that.
plus. Said C plus.
Yeah.
yeah, same for me. I'm going to go C plus. Like everyone said so far, there's a couple questionable picks there, especially with the first two rounds. And they didn't really do anything to address their glaring needs. I mean, they did get Slay, but there's still a need for a couple more pieces in the secondary. So it wasn't really a great offseason for Philly.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little bit lower than you guys. I'm actually gonna say I think C minus for me actually. Just looking at how much they lost, and I think I'm a little bit more questionable at the Rager pick than you guys are. And it hurts, as we already mentioned, there are some definite question marks there. Even with Slay, who's kind of like their big offseason acquisition, there are some serious question marks with him as well. I
They
mean,
paid him the big bucks.
he had some injury concerns last year. He does like to talk, and sometimes teams that doesn't always work well in the locker room. So we'll have to see what happens there. But I think C minus, C that range for me. But yeah,
That's
if
definitely fair.
we don't have any more Philadelphia talk, we'll move into the next teams, and there's some serious drop off from the Cowboys and the Eagles to our
Playing it
final
nicely.
teams in the NFC East. Um, Obviously, even the Eagles and Cowboys that we already addressed, they have some serious concerns. But these two teams, they are full on rebuild. If they win 6 or 7 games, it'll kind of be a miracle this year. But we'll dive into the first one, which is the New York Giants. So as I mentioned at the top, they were a really good team, a few years ago, but have not been a really good team for a few seasons now, and last year was no different. 2019, they finished 4-12, missed the playoffs again, and then fired their coach again and brought in Joe Judge, a former New England coach, who I guess by all accounts is trying to change the culture and doing a good job of that. But that's what they say about every new coach. So we'll have to, I guess, wait and see on that front. In terms of player additions, they added a quarterback, James Bradbury, linebacker, Blake Martinez, linebacker, Kyler Fackrell, running back, Dion Lewis, quarterback, Colt McCoy, and offensive tackle, Cam Fleming. In terms of subtractions, not a whole lot. Antoine Betha, safety, who they haven't re-signed yet. Alec Ogletree, linebacker, who again is still an unrestricted free agent. Mike Remmers, offensive tackle to the Chiefs. Cody Latimer, wide receiver to the Redskins. Dion Buchanan, linebacker from Atlanta, to Atlanta, I mean, and Antonio Hamilton, cornerback that went to Kansas City. They also lost one of my personal favorite players and arguably one of the best quarterbacks in their franchise history, Eli Manning, who chose to finally hang it up and retired. In the draft, they shocked some people with their first round pick, which was fourth overall, with selecting Andrew Thomas, offensive lineman out of Georgia. They definitely have some offensive line concerns. People were kind of surprised they didn't go with another guy like Wills or Wirfs or even Mekhi Becton. Then they kind of got a steal there in round two with their round two pick. They selected Xavier McKinney, safety out of Alabama. A lot of people were predicting him to go in the first round, so he kind of fell to them in the second round. The third round, they took Matt Peart, offensive tackle out of Connecticut. And then fourth round, they took Darnay Holmes, cornerback out of UCLA. But guys, do you think that the Giants are going to be at least entertaining to watch? I don't think any of us think that they're going to be a borderline playoff team this year, but do you think that they'll at least progress through their rebuild positively, or will they take a serious step back from even just a 4-win season last year? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't think the team's going to take a major step forward, but I'm excited to see what Daniel Jones can do. I'm not excited to watch the Giants in terms of in general as a team, but I'm very excited to watch what Daniel Jones can do in a sophomore season in the league. You know, I think he definitely has some talent and some upside to be more of a better, just a better quarterback in general. He turned the ball over a ton last year. There's no arguing that he fumbled the ball like 850,000 times, which was absolutely ridiculous. Fingers in the pocket, just couldn't hold on to the football. But he really didn't throw that many interceptions. I think he threw 14, which is not too bad for a rookie. I expect him to throw at least 20. And the fumbles obviously attribute to a lot of that, a lot more turnovers in that regard. But I'm really excited to see what he can do next year. I think he gets a little too much hate, but I think he has a chance to be a pretty good quarterback in this league.
Yeah, I think the Giants will definitely be entertaining to watch with Daniel Jones front and center. But I wanted to kind of address the Andrew Thomas pick, fourth overall. I know a lot of people, including myself, were questioning that, but I looked more into that. He did grade out at 92.7, which is like third among FBS tackles. And it was the best grade from an SEC tackle since La'el Collins in 2014. So I think it was the right choice. We know Dave Gettleman likes those big hog mollies, and Thomas is all of that. I mean, he's 6'5", 315 pounds. I think he can come in and start right away, and I think he'll eventually can be like an all-pro tackle kind of guy. They also got Matt
Absolutely.
Hurt. He's another behemoth. He's like 6'7", I think, 318 pounds and like 37-inch arms. He did start in all 48 games. I mean, it is UConn, but that is pretty impressive in its own right. He has experience both tackle and guard. So I do believe that was they had a pretty solid draft, kind of filling those needs that were on the offensive line they desperately needed. And as Drew mentioned, Xavier McKinney was definitely a steal. But this team is pretty far away from winning some meaningful games or anything like that. But they should be entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to be entertaining to watch. With kind of like Chris, you said, I like Daniel Jones as a quarterback. I think it'll be really entertaining to see him be like the clear cut number one guy this year. I know last year there was a ton of speculation in the offseason about whether it be Eli or whether it be Jones, but this year Jones is clearly the guy. So it'll be kind of fun to see
Right.
if he can kind of resolve some of those fumble issues that plagued him last year and really kind of step in and be potentially like the next great Giants quarterback following Manning, and I think he has the potential to be that. I think obviously that pick shocked a ton of people last year when they selected him in I think it
Oh
was
yeah.
fourth overall again, right? But I
Six,
think
I think.
they it still is kind of a weird pick because they could have got him a lot later. But he kind of defended it because he did play well in his rookie season. And that offense is going to be entertaining with Barkley. They also don't have a terrible receiving core. It's not great by any means, but Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, Evan Ingram aren't terrible players, receiving options for Jones. So he'll have some opportunities to succeed. And Barkley is one of the best running backs in the game too, so he'll be fun to watch. But that Andrew Thomas pick, to your point, Ryan, did kind of surprise me. I when I was Doing my research for the draft and watching mock drafts, I kind of thought that Wirfs and Wills were probably going to go ahead of Thomas. I thought Thomas would be the third one off the board, especially with all the kind of the off the field concerns that kind of surrounded Mekhi Becton there later, towards in the draft process at least. But kind of like what you said, when I started to do some tape, and kind of heard what the Giants were saying about him. I think it was a very defensible pick, and it really filled a serious need that the Giants needed to fill on the offensive line. They also added, of course, Fleming too in the free agency as well. So that'll hopefully address that offensive line, which will in turn help Daniel Jones and that offense. But they should be entertaining to watch at least. Definitely, I think more entertaining than the final NFC East team we're going to talk about. But that defense still kind of creates some serious concerns, in my opinion.
Yeah, both on players they lost and got. They really didn't do anything in this offseason in terms of just moves. James Bradbury probably their biggest, maybe Blake Martinez too. Those are mediocre signings as well. They didn't really lose anyone of super big no. Like Deion Buchanan's all right. Antoine Bethay's like 850 years old, so he can't really count on him. So it's basically just up to the draft. And I think they did their job in the draft. Andrew Thomas. Say what you want about him. I know there's people questioning the pick. They need an offensive lineman. They just took the best one they thought they were going to get. I don't know if this is the right pick or not. Mekhi Becton probably would have been my pick here, but if this is the guy they like the most, this is the guy they like the most, and hopefully it works out for him. But I really like the Xavier McKinney pick, like you guys were saying. I think he can be an elite safety in this league. And I think he was an absolute steal in the second round. I thought he was going to go even maybe mid first round. I've seen teams even draft him as high as like 17 to 18 on their boards. He's a very good player, and I'm very excited to see what he can do in that secondary. We'll see if DeAndre Baker even plays, their first round pick of last year. He had the concerns off the field. Maybe doing armed robbery. I'm not really sure about that or not. But if he can play, the secondary could be kind of entertaining to watch. Baker kind of struggled last year, but I feel like in his sophomore season he could be a little bit better. He was kind of lost in that defense last year. If you really even paid attention, like sometimes they would be in zone and he'd be covering man defense and he just get absolutely torched. And that makes sense because if you're not in the right defense, you're obviously going to get burned. But we'll see if he can find a kind of slot, be more even keel this year in his second season in the league with more.
Yeah, I agree. I think the McKinney pick was a really good pick, and I think it kind of proved that the Giants front office isn't as maybe dumb as a lot of people like to think.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a classic thing where McKinney was dropping, and a lot of teams were like, "Oh, well, we got to pick our guy." And McKinney, I think, was a top, easily a first round talent in my opinion, and
Oh, yeah.
he was available, and at that pick, it was an incredible value that the Giants got out of that second round pick, selecting McKinney. So I think that was a really nice pick by Gettleman there. But I think a lot of people are giving him much deserved credit in regards to that pick as well. And kind of conclude with your point about Thomas. I know I said that he was probably like the third or fourth guy in my opinion on my board, but those top four guys were kind of pretty interchangeable.
Right.
In all honesty, they were all really good offensive line. This was a really good draft for offensive line help, and the Giants
It
needed a lot
was.
of it, so it kind of worked out in their favor. But do you guys have any other kind of thoughts on the Giants, or do you want to jump into our fantasy studs here?
I kind of do want to address the wide receiving core. Kind of has, as you mentioned earlier, they got like Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, and Darius Slayton, who wasn't bad last year to be sure about that. But they got kind of a collection of wide receiver twos and wide receiver threes on this team. I'm not really sure who can step up. Golden Tate at this point in his career is more just that check down guy, the guy that's going to get you 7 yards, and he may run after the catch, but I don't think he's the same elite talent at that as he was earlier in his career. You got Darius Slayton's more the home run threat, the guy that can go up and get that jump ball and then run it in for a 70-yard touchdown. But he's not really that guy that you can rely on underneath and even on intermediate routes. He's basically just a one-trick pony down the field. He can't really do anything else. He caught a lot of touchdown passes last year, but I don't know if you can rely on him for that much this year. And then Sterling Shepard, he's one concussion away from being retired, man. This guy,
Yeah.
when he's pretty talented. I think he's a very decent receiver in this league, a guy that is very serviceable and can kind of do a little bit of everything, but he's never on the field, so it doesn't really matter. And then Evan Ingram, same problems with him. He can't stay on the field, but he's a very athletic tight end. When he is on the field, he catches a lot of passes. He creates a lot of disruption on the defensive side of the ball. So, this is a group of weapons. That it's not bad as a whole, but they don't have that alpha dog on this team. And I don't think anyone's going to step up this year. So Jones is just going to have to pick. He's going to have to find a guy to rely on.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. There's really nobody that jumps off to the paper to you. Is there any Chris? Is there anyone that they just picked up, like maybe any of these rookies, like Austin Mack or Benjamin Victor, or David Sills? Any of those guys excite you that could make some impact in the future?
It's possible. I don't really have anyone that really sticks out to me in general, but these are guys that definitely can make an impact in the future. So we'll have to see on that. I'm not
What
really
about
sure.
Corey Coleman? Or is he done too? I mean, I
Oh,
know he.
jeez, man. He is still on the roster, and that's a guy that I was pretty high on coming out of the draft. I think he's got talent, but the problem is just sticking with the team, and I don't know. He's kind of just buried on the depth chart. I actually was, statting out this team for I was statting out this team in terms of fantasy, and I was trying to kind of figure out who's going to be the alpha dog here. And Coleman ended up getting a few targets on this team, so I think he will be that fourth option. I just don't know if he'll really do a lot besides maybe catch a couple jump balls. Can't really do. He hasn't really proven that he can do anything else in this league.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's like a obviously not like a star-studded wide receiving core, but I think it's respectable. And you look at a lot of like the other young quarterbacks who are kind of flung into like a starting role early on in their careers. Unless you're like Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, you don't typically have a really strong receiving core around you. And I think the Giants' receiving core is at least respectable. Like you said, Chris, they have a lot of clear, number 2 and number 3 guys, and a decent tight end as well. Even Deion Lewis, I know he's old, but he's a decent
Ah,
receiving
jeez.
option. Decent receiving option out of the backfield there.
He's not
Um,
going to see the field at all with Saquon there, and
yeah,
that's probably the answer to who's their best receiver. It's Saquon
yeah,
Barkley.
it's
This
yeah,
man, giving him enough credit here. I kind of just want to jump into it really quick. He's just an uber talented running back. He's definitely I think he's definitely the second best running back in the league, and he's going to carry this offense as far as he is. As far as he can stay healthy, he's going to be a dynamic player like he was at the end of last season.
yeah, and I think that kind of just supports what I was saying too. Is they got a good receiving core, especially including out of the backfield. So I think
Fair.
I definitely don't think the receiving core they won't like help Jones kind of take that next step. But they definitely won't make him like digress, in my opinion.
Right.
So um, yeah, and I think they're gonna have like another rough year this year, most likely. I don't know how you guys are gonna kind of predict, but by all accounts, they're probably not gonna be a great team this year. So I could see them maybe taking a wide receiver high in next year's NFL draft to
Me
kind of
too.
address maybe a guy that kind of grown to that potential as a clear number one guy. But let's jump into the fantasy studs now. Ryan, who do you think is going to be a great fantasy football pick from the Giants this year?
Well, it's kind of a risky one because, as Chris mentioned, he never stays healthy. But I'm going to go Evan Ingram because Saquon's kind of the obvious pick. If Ingram can stay on the field, he's definitely a great vertical threat. He's an athletic freak, and he's a good target in the red zone. But like we all mentioned, there are injury concerns, so I would not recommend taking him as your tight end one. Maybe stashing him on the bench and seeing if he can stay healthy consistently. But it could pay off if he stays healthy.
Yeah, I like the Ingram pick there. The problem with him is that you're probably not going to be able to get him as anything other than your tight end one, unless you're trying to take George Kittle and him in probably the first 6 rounds. If Evan Ingram falls in the draft a little bit, falls in fantasy drafts a little bit more, maybe to like the 8th round, I would definitely be willing to take the shot on him. It's just going to be all about draft price for him. He always seems to find his way up in like the 4th or 5th round, and people always reach on him. At least in my home league, people love to reach on him.
Yeah, me
Really
too.
understand.
Me too.
I mean, he is very talented, but he just can't stay on the field. And this is a guy I definitely would be interested in as my tight end one. Taking the shot on him kind of later in drafts if he falls a little bit. But if he doesn't, I would probably be hands off of him.
Yeah, I completely agree too, Ryan. Real quick, like we talked about earlier with Philly's tight ends, there's a serious drop off after you get out of like the Kittle Kelsey range, really, and even Kelsey has some kind of question marks around him because he's getting up there in age a little bit.
Right.
Um, so yeah, if Ingram drops, like Chris said, don't take him in the 4th or 5th round. But like if he drops like the 8th or 9th round, and you're still looking for a tight end, I think
I would
he's a really
definitely
good
get
pick.
him there.
He's a really good
Yeah,
pick. Chris, who's
absolutely.
your fantasy stud?
So fantasy stud here is kind of a stretch because I really just don't know who to pick on this offense. I feel like I'm basically besides Saquon going to be hands off of this offense. I definitely want Saquon for sure. I really want him in every draft I can get him. But I'm basically just gonna be hands off all the weapons for the most part, unless Ingram kind of falls, maybe Tate later in the draft. But I'm gonna go with Daniel Jones here. I think he can be a sneaky upside pick. Take him late in drafts. Kind of stash him on the bench because I know he has a very tough start of the season. He's going to be rough. Don't drop him right away. I would keep him on your bench for a few weeks. You can take him super late in drafts. This is a guy that could could really reward you in the second half of the season with some quarterback one finishes because last year he was a very he was a playable fantasy option in the right matchup. He had a lot of big weeks. When he played the Bucks in his first week, I think he had north of 30 points. He had a couple rushing touchdowns. And this is a guy I could see doing that a couple times in the season. So in the right matchup, I'm definitely willing to play him as my quarterback one. Just not early in the season because, like I said, really rough schedule. I think the first 4 weeks are all against top 15 defenses. I'm not trying to play him in any of them.
I agree. Jones would actually be my pick, so I'm kind of trying to figure out who I'm going to say for my fantasy stud pick
It's
because
tough in this offense, man.
there's really not a lot of good options, and like we already mentioned, they don't have a great defense either. So I can't just cop out and say, "Oh, pick the defense." But yeah, I think Daniel Jones, he could kind of emerge as maybe a potential like low end QB1 there late, and especially if you're waiting on a quarterback, like I know a lot of teams like to do. If you miss out on like the top guys, he could be a kind of a sneaky sleeper pick there.
Right.
And obviously with Barkley too, I mean he's like the top running back and one of the top running backs in fantasy. Definitely some injury concerns there, but I think that the fact that the Giants improved their offensive line this year could definitely help him and pay dividends if you take him as your. Obviously, he's a clear-cut RB1, but if you take him with your first-round pick, he could definitely pay some serious dividends there. Because I know there are some injury concerns surrounding him a little bit after last season. But for my pick, I don't know. I guess I'll go Sterling Shepard. I guess if he stays healthy, he could be a decent maybe wide receiver 3 on your team. But yeah, you guys really kind of talked about it. Outside of Barkley, and you can make an argument for Ingram and Jones too. There's really not a lot of fantasy options on this team, which kind of really seriously kind of contrasts the Cowboys to the top of this division, who have like a multitude of really clear-cut fantasy options. But
it's kind of interesting that you said that right there. I was just actually about to talk about the Cowboys in this discussion because you look at all three of these receivers; they're not bad. It's kind of like the Cowboys in regard where all three receivers are reliable options in terms of just NFL receivers. Like they're all guys I would be willing to take on my team as wide receiver 2 or 3. Not to the same extent of the Cowboys, but it's three really solid receivers. But I don't want any part of any of them in fantasy. You just don't know which guy's gonna hit in that group. But if you want to take a shot at Golden Tate late in drafts, that'd be the one I'd be willing to do because he did have a massive target there for a few weeks, and I know he had a monster week with Daniel Jones. I think he had a 2 touchdown game where he caught 2 really long passes, basically back to back. So, and you're not going to get that from him much, but he's definitely a guy that I could see getting, 5 receptions a game and being a flex option for you if you can get him really late in drafts.
yeah, I mean their receivers though they're flex options in my opinion at best. Like a lot of these guys are just going to sit on your bench.
Slayton as well is going to be a guy that you could play and get a big week out of, but you're probably only going to get 3 or 4 big weeks out of him in the season. And you're going to be very disappointed with the rest of his outlook.
These are just guys that you're going to have to start 1 week because your main guys are on bye, and then you're just going to be really mad at your phone when you realize that they only get you like 4 or 5 points. So,
right.
All right. So, final thing with the Giants. What's your overall grades on these guys? I guess I think we started with Ryan with the fantasy. So, Chris, you can start off with this.
For the Giants, I'm just going to give them a C. They drafted well, but they didn't really add anything in free agent. They also didn't really lose anything. So, very boring. I'm going to give them a C.
Wow, that's pretty harsh. I'm going to give them a B+. Like you said, they drafted well. I know they didn't pick up anyone really meaningful in free agency, but I think Thomas and Pert, and especially McKinney, are going to pay off to be good players down the line. I really liked how they draft, so I'm going to go B+.
I'm going to go right between you guys and say B- for pretty much everything that you guys just said. Chris, I agree. They didn't really add that much. They didn't really lose a ton. They didn't really add that much in terms of free agency, but I really like their draft. So, yeah, B-.
Yeah, I could definitely see them. I could see. I probably was a little too harsh. I would say probably C+ actually because they did have a plus draft for sure. Like I said again, like free agency didn't really do anything. If they would have had an average draft, I probably should have been a C+, B- would probably be more fair. I think I was a little too low on them at first.
That's good. So believe it or not, there's actually a team that's worse than the Giants in this division, and that's the Washington Redskins, who last year finished 3-13, missed the playoffs again, and brought in former longtime Carolina Panthers head coach Ron Rivera to take over their head coaching duties. He's a really good coach, and I think eventually he'll be able to really kind of turn that franchise around, turn the culture around, especially. So it'll be interesting to see what he does eventually. But he's not a miracle worker. When you look at this roster, it's hard to see them winning more than like 4 or 5 games at most, in my opinion, at least. In terms of acquisitions outside of the draft, they added cornerback Kendall Fuller, linebacker Thomas Davis Sr., safety Sean Davis, offensive tackle Wes Schweitzer, running back Peyton Barber, running back J.D. McKissick, cornerback Ronald Darby, quarterback Kyle Allen, and wide receiver Cody Latimer. They lost Quentin Dunbar, cornerback to Seattle, Case Keenum to the Browns, Eric Flowers to the Dolphins, Josh Norman to the Bills, and they also lost tight ends Vernon Davis and Jordan Reed. Vernon Davis officially retired. Jordan Reed, there's still some speculation whether or not he's going to end up officially retiring or not. And they lost running back Chris Thompson to the Jaguars, Paul Richardson Jr., which they still haven't signed yet, and Trent Williams, which that was just a massive headache of a contract trade dispute there with him. They finally were able to trade him to the San Francisco 49ers. In terms of the draft, because they finished so poorly last year at 3-13, they got the second overall pick and got arguably the best football player in the entire NFL draft in Chase Young, the edge rusher out of Ohio State. So that was a really good pickup for them. Then they got Antonio Gibson in the third round, a wide receiver out of Memphis. And in the fourth round, they spent their 2 picks on Sadiq Charles, offensive tackle at LSU. Hopefully I said that right. And Antonio Gandy Golden, wide receiver out of Liberty. So, guys, obviously, this is not the most entertaining team to talk about by any means, but kind of same thing with the Giants. Do you think that they could at least show some positive signs of kind of growth this year, or do you think that they might even take a step back and maybe be a 2-win team rather than a 3-win team?
Yeah, this is a team that's going to be the first overall pick next year. I'm confident that they're going to be the worst football this year. I just don't think this team has any talent. This is a roster that lost some of their best defensive and offensive players last year. You know, Trent Williams is their best overall player. He's gone. Eric Flowers, no slouch himself. He's also gone. Quentin Dunbar was probably their best DB last year. He's gone as well. Well, now he's not going to play football again, I don't think, because, armed robbery. And him and DeAndre Baker possibly do. They kind of lost some mediocre weapons on offense, so not really too bad on that. I know they lost a lot of offensive players, but really no one of note, I would say. Paul Richardson, he's all right, I guess. They really didn't add that much in free agency. Kendall Fuller's, he's decent at corner. Thomas Davis is like 58. And then the rest of their free agent class it stinks. This is just a team that's going to be trash this year, and I'm fully expecting them to win 1 or 2 games this year.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's much to say when you have a roster this bad. I guess the exciting thing to watch will be is Dwayne Haskins going to pan out. Is he going to start to pan out if he does get a shot at quarterback again this year? And then also, I mean, who's going to be the best Ohio State defensive end between the Bosa twins or Bosa brothers and then Chase Young? It'll be exciting to watch.
Yeah, Chase Young's going to be an absolute stud this year. There's no question about that. That is the one unit on the Redskins that is elite. That might be one of the better units in this actual division. Their D line is unbelievably good. They got a lot of talent. Jonathan Allen's an absolute stud. I'm kind of blanking on a couple other names, but I know they have
Kerrigan, Russian
Ryan Kerrigan's
he's absolute beast.
He's getting up there in age a little bit, but
yeah. Jonathan Allen, Chase Young are a very good edge rushing duo.
Montez Sweat too. He's not bad.
Yep. Yeah, he's also a stud. They have a lot of depth in that front seven, but outside of that on the defense, their secondary is going to get absolutely torched this year, and it is going to be embarrassingly bad. I would say the worst. This might be the worst secondary in football. They were really bad last year. The front seven might be able to help them out a little bit. Maybe they won't be the absolute worst, but in terms of just pure talent in their secondary, it's just there's none of it at all.
Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty much touched on all there. Their defense, their defensive line, obviously, is actually pretty good. So their defense might kind of be respectable and kind of keep them in their game in some games. But their secondary is not good at all, like you said, Chris. And offensively, I mean, we were talking about how the Giants receiving core maybe was like league average. It's like around there. I mean, you look at Terry McLaurin is their wide receiver 1. Like, give me a break.
He's awesome.
Jeremy Sprinkle is their tight end number 1 guy. What? So I don't know. They like Terry McLaurin. He's a good receiver, but like on a good team, he's probably like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, and he's not bad. Like by any means.
I don't agree with that, but
all right. Well, we'll talk about this, but I don't know. In my opinion, when that's your offense, you're doomed to fail. Running back, they're not terrible. I think Darius Geis if he can stay healthy, he's not bad. Adrian Peterson, I mean, he's like 1,000 years old, so you can't really expect too much from him. But he wasn't terrible last year. But yeah, I think it'll be a race between the Redskins and the Jaguars for that number 1 overall pick, in my opinion. I mean, I think that these 2 teams are by far the worst in the NFL.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. But I do want to address obviously Terry McLaurin really bad. I think he's awesome. I'm a huge Terry McLaurin fan. I think with such bad quarterback play last year, he was still he almost I think he almost had 1,000 yards last season, which is incredible for a rookie wide receiver. He was arguably the best rookie wide receiver last year. He was unbelievably good. And they didn't invest a lot of draft capital in him. But I think this is a player that I really liked coming into last year. Obviously, I wasn't like on my fantasy radar or anything. I know we're not getting into that, but this is a guy. He really blossomed at the start of the season, and he kept it going even with Dwayne Haskins' absolutely putrid play at quarterback. He still was able to catch a couple touchdown passes, and he even had a couple where Haskins just flat out missed him in the end zone. When he just creates a ton of separation off the line. He's got a nice speed outlook. He can go up and get the ball. He's a good route runner. I think he's a very well-rounded receiver and a guy that I could see really blossoming into a wide receiver one in this league.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. If it hadn't been for such putrid quarterback play, he would definitely would have been having his first 1,000 yard receiving season. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think he's probably on his way to a few Pro Bowls. I think he's that good. I think he's a wide receiver one. And if we're talking fantasy, I know we're not going to get into that right now, but he's definitely one to look out for in your draft.
Yeah, especially with the lack of talent around him. I know they added. I kind of want to get into this now. Antonio Gandy Golden is a sleeper pick. He can go up and get the jump ball as well. This is a guy that I could see pairing across from Terry on the outside, and then Antonio Gibson. I know he said he's a wide receiver, but he's more of like a scat back. This is a guy that kind of come out of the back. He's going to take over that Chris Thompson role, but he's going to be a lot better at it because he's a more explosive athlete than Chris Thompson ever would or will be. Uh, and Gibson can also he can carry the ball every once in a while too. I think I could see him getting about 100 rushes and 40, 50 targets. This is a guy that I could see making an instant impact on this offense, and that's why they drafted him with their. I know it wasn't their second, but it was the second pick they had in the draft in the third round.
Yeah, going back real quick to McLaurin, I think that we talked before about Devontae Parker, kind of off air, and I'm a lot more high on him than you guys are, and I think this is
Oh,
just kind of the exact opposite. You guys are a lot higher on McLaurin than I am, but I guess we'll have to agree to disagree. But yeah, that's at least how I feel. Antonio Gibson, he's actually I'm looking at their depth chart right now, the Redskins depth chart, and he's actually listed as a running back on their depth chart, at least on
right.
ESPN. So yeah, I think he could be a decent option though, like kind of like what you said, Chris. But I
Yeah,
think the only really kind of outside of like Chase Young, obviously, I think he's gonna be really good. Like I said, best player in the NFL draft. I think the other big kind of really the only big storyline out of the Redskins this year is Dwayne Haskins their guy. So before we kind of talk about the fantasy studs of the Redskins, I wanted to kind of pose that question to you guys.
I mean, he definitely wasn't in the best situation last year, but he also didn't really show much promise for me either. I think it was a combination of both. New coaching staff now, so I could see him taking a step forward in terms of his ability. But even him taking a step forward is probably still a bottom four quarterback in the league. He, outside of McLaurin, like I said, he really didn't have anybody to throw the ball to, and they really struggled to move the chains consistently, except for against the Lions, which was pretty funny when they beat them. But he I feel like he has some potential to be a pretty good quarterback in this league, but if he does, he needs to show it now before because they're gonna be bad again this year, and he needs them to pass on a quarterback this year pretty much. So he has to show a lot of promise this year. So maybe they'll draft a receiver like Jamar Chase in the first round instead of his replacement.
Yeah, I agree. I was kind of disappointed. He really looked NFL ready coming out of college, especially. I know Ohio State's not typically an air raid offense, but they really kind of morphed that offense into an air raid his last year there. I thought he was going to come in and kind of impress. In the day and age, today's day and age, where rookies surprisingly come in and impress a lot of the times. I thought he was going to be one of those guys, but again, we got to look at his circumstances. He's playing on probably the worst team in the league, definitely right now. So that'll be something to watch going forward. But yeah, I'm interested to see how he pans out.
Yeah, I mean, this was like their top pick last year, and I remember as a Lions fan, I remember a lot of people were like, "Oh man, I hope the Lions draft Haskins as Stafford's potential replacement." So there was a lot of hype around Haskins, and I think to your guys' point, I think it's a little bit too early to just completely just say, "Okay,
Yeah,
it's done." He's not a quarterback because, like you said, it was a tough, really tough situation, maybe the worst situation in all the league last year, and he definitely didn't make things better.
no,
And I do think I have some serious concerns about his character. I mean, we saw that him take a picture with a fan after they beat the Lions. First of all, the Lions were not a good team, and like, what is going on? Like, what are you doing, man? And by all accounts, he maybe doesn't have the best work ethic. Doesn't want it as much as you want your franchise quarterback to want it. But at the same time, apparently the offseason he's really focused on maybe trying to be a better leader. So maybe there's some serious growth there. But I think I still have some hope for him. I think as long as he kind of improves his work ethic a little bit, I think he could be a potential franchise guy here in Washington. Maybe at least can show some signs here of some potential growth. But I could also see a world where he just completely falls off a cliff, and then Alex Smith, if he recovers from injury, ends up being the starter here by the end of the year, or even Kyle Allen. And we already saw what Kyle
Oh,
Allen did
jeez.
last year with Carolina, so that's not a great option either for Washington. So,
No.
yeah. But on the bright side, though, regardless, Washington's not going to be a good team, whether Haskins is good or not. So if Haskins isn't good, they can maybe get Trevor Lawrence in next year's draft.
Yeah, and even Justin Fields would probably be an upgrade over him as well. I'm higher. I'm really high on him as well coming into the draft. They also have that the quarterback. He's kind of blank. I'm kind of blanking on his name right now, but the North Dakota State quarterback is also an option up there. At those guys are all going to be top 5 picks. This is a very top heavy quarterback draft, also receiver draft. So if he does work out, they can take a really high end receiver in the draft. I kind of wanted to get into before we get into the fantasy option. I kind of wanted to talk about this running back room. Not an exciting running back room by any means, but add Peyton Barber, J.D. McKissick to a already really crowded backfield with always oft injured Darius Geis, Antonio Gibson, which he might play a little running back, Adrian Peterson. Well, not anymore, but they just have a ton of mediocre running backs. Who do you see emerging from this backfield as the starter?
Man, your guess is as good as mine. Guys has injury concerns. Adrian Peterson, like we said, is 400 years old. I mean, I'm
It's
gonna go
500.
with Gibson, just based on talent. I know he hasn't stepped on the field yet, but from what I've seen on film and stuff like that, he's a freak athlete. I think he's definitely explosive out of the backfield. I'm gonna go Gibson because just given the circumstances of everyone else.
I think
Yeah.
Gibson's sure to have a role, definitely.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go with the safe bet here, and the guy who's been doing the longest is Peterson. I know we keep making fun of how old he is, but it seems like last year. A Geis, I think he's the most talented, but as you said,
Yes, I
Chris,
agree.
he's always injured, and I think I can just see a world where Geis is gonna get injured again, and Peterson's gonna emerge as that number one guy. Unless, like you said, Ryan, unless Antonio Gibson definitely shows some signs of potential, so he definitely could evolve into that number one role. But I just think I just believe in the guy that has been doing it the longest. I think that's Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, with on that, I actually do. I think it's Darius Geis is going to end up emerging if he can stay healthy. I think he is the most talented back in this field, and I think he'll take a decent workload. If again, huge if he stays healthy. Another knee injury for him, and I think his career is over in the NFL. I think he'll be done because he's had some catastrophic injuries his first couple of seasons. Really tough to recover from all his knee injuries. I feel like it's already taken away a little bit of his explosiveness. I think this is a guy that I think he's only 22, 23, but he feels like he's like I feel like with all his knee injuries, he plays more like a 25, 26-year-old, like more of a veteran guy in the running back world because age is a big difference in terms of running back than any other position. 25, 26, you're already getting up there in age, and with all those knee injuries, he's already lost a couple seasons. So it's basically just do or die for him now. If he can't get it done this year, then I think he's gonna find himself quickly without a job if he can't stay on the field. But in terms of talent, I think I think he could take over the alpha dog role, and I don't think it'll be a crazy. I think it'll be more like a 55% snap percentage role, but I think he can be the guy that carries the most work if healthy.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there, Chris. It's definitely a make or break year for Geis, as it is for Haskins too. And as exciting as that running back room will be, and whether Haskins is proved to be the guy or not, I think it's easy to say that the most entertaining player on this team is going to be Chase Young to see what he can do on the defensive side of the
Yeah,
ball.
absolutely.
But the fact that we're already talking about the 2021 draft in regards to the Redskins just shows you how bad this team is most likely going to be next year. But let's jump into the fantasy studs here as we wrap up our final team on the NFC East. I think Ryan, let you go first.
It's easy for me. Terry McLaurin. I'm expecting another solid year despite who's playing quarterback. I'm really high on Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, I kind of want to jump into that too. I'll give you another name as well after I talk about McLaurin, but I think McLaurin's a guy you can draft as a wide receiver 3 because people are a little bit concerned about some consistency issues with him just because of how bad Haskins was. But I think Haskins takes a small incremental jump forward, and McLaurin is going to be a beneficiary of that. Like I said earlier, missed him on a couple deep passes last year that would have turned bust weeks into boom weeks for him. I know a couple 40-yard touchdowns that I saw he was just absolutely wide open. That somehow Haskins found a way to miss him. McLaurin is a guy that I draft as a wide receiver 3, and I actually really want to draft him. I'm going to look for him in almost any league I'm in. A guy that you can draft as a wide receiver 3, and I think he will end up as an easy wide receiver 2 for me. Probably a top 20 receiver in terms of fantasy points scored. There's going to be a little inconsistency, and it's probably not a guy you want to rely on as your wide receiver 2, but having him in like the flex position or whatever, giving you wide receiver 2 production most weeks is going to be awesome for your team. And I feel like this is a guy you definitely want to go target. Um, on my actual pick, though, I'll go with Antonio Gibson. I think this is a guy you can draft super late in your drafts, and he's going to catch some passes out of the backfield. I know Ron Rivera was talking about him as a Christian McCaffrey type back, which is flat out not true. You can't read in every headline you see in terms of that article because it really wasn't exactly what he said. He just said he had a similar skill set to a guy like Christian McCaffrey, which is true. He can do a little bit of everything, and I think it's going to show in terms of fantasy. I think this is a guy you can kind of plug into your lineup and you'll get some points on him. He's a safe flex option for you and a guy you can draft super late in your drafts that no one's really going to even be targeting in redraft. Maybe dynasty, it's a different story, but this is a guy I would definitely target. Another guy I want in late in drafts, just kind of fill in a bench spot that can play for your team when you need them.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of stick there in the running back room with my pick, kind of like you did, Chris. I'm gonna kind of cheat a little bit. I'm gonna say Geis and Peterson combined. I think these are two guys that you can get like late in the draft, or even just a lot of the times they'll probably go undrafted too. As we talked about when we just talked about the running back room there in Washington, Geis has a lot of potential, but injuries are a serious concern. So if you can kind of pick him up on the waiver wire or get him late in your draft, he could prove to be a really decent pick, and there's really no risk there. Same thing with Peterson. He's just a solid running back, like I said earlier, and he's going to get you just maybe a few touchdowns here and there. I think the ceiling for Peterson is definitely a lot lower than it is for Geis. I think Geis, if he stays healthy, could be a potential flex RB2 option. Peterson is more of a guy that you'll just kind of play when when your main guys are on bye week or get injured. So I guess Geis is my pick. After I kind of talked about it, I think Geis is my sleeper fantasy
Yeah,
pick. But
yeah,
um,
that's an interesting pick there for sure. I'm concerned to see where he's going to go in drafts exactly because I've seen him. I've kind of been looking at some mock drafts and seen people take him the ninth round. I feel like that's a little too rich for me. But if you can get him down in the 11th round as maybe your running back 4, he's a guy that definitely has the upside to do more than that. I think he even has the I would say it's like a 5% chance for him to be this, but I could see him even being a high end RB2 running back 1 if he explodes. He had a big game last year. He had 10 rushes for like 145 yards and 2 scores and a couple of receptions. Obviously he's not going to do that every week, but you can see that he's got the big play potential, and he's a guy that has burst. He has hands. He can kind of do it all. So if he actually emerges as the running back 1 in this offense, I could see him being a very helpful contributor. But I would not want to take him anything. I would say round 10 and back, I would be willing to take him, but nothing ahead of that.
yeah, I agree, and he's definitely got a lot more potential than other guys you would end up taking there as in your
Right.
RB4 spot, in my
Absolutely.
opinion. A lot of
Absolutely.
risk, but I feel like the reward could be a lot too. So finally, what's your grade on the Redskins overall offseason? I think Ryan, you start with fantasy, so Chris, we'll start with you. This shouldn't take too long though.
No, I'm gonna give them a C minus. Lost more than they got. Just got. I mean, they made the easy pick of Chase Young, and then after that, Antonio Gibson, Antonio Gandy Golden, not bad pickups there. But losing a lot. I think they lost a lot more in terms of they lost a lot more in terms of free agency than they got back, and I think it's gonna show in terms of the season. So C minus for me.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. I mean, Chase Young's an easy pick to make at 2, but Antonio Gibson, yet to see. I'm excited on him, though. Didn't really pick up anybody in the offseason. They lost a lot. So, yeah, it wasn't really a great offseason in Washington, but hopefully Rivera can work some magic here.
I'll go C plus. Kind of right there with you guys. I think Chase Young has the potential to be one of the best players in the NFL, so that's why I'm giving them a little bit higher grade on that. And I also think Ron Rivera is a good coach and was kind of the right hire in my opinion. So that's why that kind of is included in their offseason moves. So that's why I give them a C plus. But um, finally, last thing we're going to do here before we close this episode is overall standing predictions for this division. It's a lot easier than some other divisions, in my opinion, at least. So, Ryan, how would you start us off with what you think the predictions are going to be?
All right, so this is easy. It's going to be the Cowboys, Eagles, Giants, and then Redskins. And I want to go specific here. I don't see the Redskins winning more than 2 games this year. I know it might be a hot take, but there's not enough talent on that roster.
100% agree. Um, I'll jump into mine after that. You know, I got the same exact standings as Ryan. I think the Cowboys are a 10-6 football team. I'll go with the Eagles, probably 9-7 or so. I don't know if you guys, that might be a hot take as well. I think some people think they're better than that. The Giants will be a 4 or 5 win football team. And the Skins, I'm going 1-15. I think this team's gonna stink.
Yeah, so I'm right there with you guys in terms of order: Cowboys, Eagles, Giants, Redskins. Cowboys, I think they're like a 10 or 11 win team. They're gonna make the playoffs. Eagles, I know I've seen a lot of people like you said, Chris, who are really high on the Eagles, but I think that they're like a 9 win team, more like 8 win team in my opinion. And I think that they could probably be battling for that wild card spot, but I don't really know if they'll end up getting it. And then Giants and Redskins, and Giants I think are going to be like a 5 or 6 win team, and Redskins, I'm right there with you guys. They're going to be like a 2, 3 win team at best, in my opinion. I mean, this team, unless Haskins just proves to be like the second coming of like the Tom Brady or whatever, there's no way they win more than five games, absolute tops. So we're all in agreement there.
Right.
Any other final thoughts on this division before we kind of close out the episode?
Yeah, I kind of want to touch on the Eagles, kind of how we were saying that we both thought we were both seeing that people were really high on them. I thought I was going to come into this and say something like they're an 11, 12 win football team, but then I ended up kind of looking at the additions and subtractions more, and I was like, man, they really lost too much to be that good. I don't think they're going to be a very good football team. I think they can be pretty good and make a wild card spot, maybe make some noise in the playoffs, but I really don't think they did as much this offseason as they should have.
Yeah, I agree. It wouldn't surprise me if they win 10 or 11 games, like some people are saying out there. But I also think 8 to 9 wins, maybe a wild card team is more realistic in my opinion, at least.
That's definitely more
Yeah,
more in the realm of possibilities than being in that
yeah.
upper echelon.
Ryan, do you have any final thoughts on the division?
I actually have the Eagles at 7 wins, so I'm a little lower than you guys. So
Oh wow! No, so you don't think they're
I
gonna
definitely
be
do
a
not
playoff
know.
team then? That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if I broke down each team,
Okay.
which maybe we'll do when the season gets a little bit closer, I think they're probably going to be like my 8th or 9th team, so just out of the playoffs. But that's interesting, Ryan, that you have them a lot lower because, like Chris said, there's a lot of people that are saying like 11, 12 wins. So they're definitely a kind of a controversial team in that regard, I think. But
Yeah, I'm kind of interested, Ryan. What do you think is the since you said they're 7-9? What do you think will be the biggest factor in them being
Honestly, I
7-9?
think the defense is just that bad. I mean, even if Wentz is healthy, we saw last year they were getting shredded. Obviously, Slay's an addition, but I think that's still just not enough. Defensive line's really aging. I know Brandon Graham's been there a while. I mean, Derek Barnett's still relatively young and a force out
Good
there,
player.
but their defense is definitely getting up there in age. And like we mentioned earlier, their wide receivers are pretty much garbage, useless. So not too confident.
Yeah, wide receiver health is going to be key there. But yeah, I definitely I would agree if they are a 7-9 football team, and I think it'll be because of the defense, not the offense. I think Wentz is a good enough quarterback to lead them to 10-6, 9-7 record in a playoff berth for sure. But if this defense runs into like one injury, they're also a very thin defense. So if they run into like one injury, it's over basically for them, especially in the secondary because they're so horrendously bad in the secondary. Besides Slay, which we'll see what he can do, but.
yeah, I think if you just look on paper, I think it's the Cowboys division to lose easily. Yeah.
Me too.
But yeah, that concludes our
Definitely.
NFC East division preview. This is like the first episode in a whole line of we'll break down each division. I'm not sure how you guys feel, but I'm most looking forward to the NFC North just because that's our hometown Lions division. But we are the Zone Defense Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, as well as Spotify. And if you haven't gotten a chance to check out our Last Dance episode on the Michael Jordan docu-series, be sure to check that out, as well as our 2010s NBA Players Draft. For those of you that are maybe new to the channel, we do NBA and NFL coverage, so definitely check those videos out. We'll also have a video where Chris and I break down the top quarterbacks in the NFL. So if you like NFL, definitely check that episode out too very soon. But thanks for listening to the episode. We're Zone Defense again, and thanks for listening.
Peace.